Okay, I'm just going to delve into game audio development today. This is meant for kind of beginners mostly, people trying to get into the industry or people that have just started. But I think it's also quite helpful for people that are outside in different disciplines, just so you can kind of understand how an audio department works. It's very brief, but I think it's important to kind of understand the various roles and skills required. And I'm going to start with the Holy Trinity of RPGs. Is everyone familiar with this? Yeah? I bring this up because I like to gamify a lot of things, including my work. And so I've done this I've gamified game audio. So what I've done is I've looked at the audio departments or audio in general as three different parts that work together to essentially, create kind of an ultimate party that you can get through anything. And while I was doing this exercise, I've actually found that there's a lot of correlation and parallel with the RPG Holy Trinity as there is with game audio, or the way I look at it. And what I'm going to do is go through each one of these. So anyone here in music? Yep, as a composers? Yeah? Yeah, nice. So, because generally, if you're working in music in video games, you are going to be a composer. That's like 99% of the roles out there. And I think music kind of works as a tank class in a sense because it does a lot of heavy lifting. It's the first thing you kind of hear. It's what people expect when a new game comes out or when existing IP comes out. You want to hear that familiar theme, that melody. It's definitely always front and center. There's audio direction for not just music, but all other aspects of audio, but especially music. It's the first thing that gets thought about when, I guess, exploring, what the art direction will be. It definitely takes the lead. So again, if it's a happy, cartoony game, you know what kind of energy the music's going to have. And obviously everything else will follow, like maybe the cutesy voices or the popping sounds. Music just has this ability to really take charge. And in the same tone, it sets the tone of what the game is. Because again, sound and voice alone can be a little bit deceiving or hard to gauge, but with music, there's no second guessing. What you hear, you understand exactly what this is about, whether it's dark and gritty, whether it's, a comedy, or whether it's, electronic, EDM, fast-paced racing game. Primary role for someone in music in the video game industry will be a composer, music composition or music production. Your expectation is just to deliver the music assets. It's maybe a little bit oversimplifying it, but that's ultimately what you're trying to do. And one thing to note, even though there are composer roles in-house in maybe bigger studios and maybe some mid-sized studios, primarily it's an outsourced job. For the composers here, you're probably aware of this, but it's something to consider. And there are people that compose while working in-house that actually have the title of sound designer usually, because that generally means there's one person that's just taking care of everything. But for the most part, composers will specifically be outsourced freelancers. So when thinking about a music career tree, it usually starts and ends like that. It's just being a composer. But, without getting too granular, we can look at some alternatives or branches. You can be a session musician. This is actually quite common, and it can be on top of your composition job. You can be writing, performing music for other composers. You can be part of an orchestra, which in turn records music for video games. Or maybe you don't have the compositional chops yet, and you just want to get into the industry this way. And it's a pretty good way because, again, as I'll discuss later, networking is a big thing. So the more composers you know, the more game devs you know, the better it will be for you. On a more managerial, stepping outside of the composer's role would be something of a music producer who essentially doesn't compose the music themselves, but gets all the resources and makes sure your project finds the composer, make sure the composer has what he needs, what she needs, and is able to deliver from start to finish the music that's required for the project. There's also a music supervisor. Again, these are roles that are perhaps can be in-house on very, very big publishing game companies. Music supervision is generally not someone who deals with new music coming in, but gaining legal license to use established music from whatever publishing music library there'll be. Like finding whether it's pop music, and music supervisors generally have a vast knowledge of music from all genres, and I know how to get them. And these are a little bit more diplomatic, but they deal with all the contracts, the copyrights, everything that's required to get games. Games like Grand Theft Auto, for example, would need a very strong music supervisor who'd be able to make sure that all the paperwork is done, and we have the company has the legal rights to use all the music tracks, and it gets very complicated. There's definitely lawyers involved, but ultimately, if you're a composer and you want something bigger, and I've seen this happen. I guess throughout my careers, where composers have gone on to be audio directors. And I guess what an audio director would be in a, larger studio is just set the overall tone of where the audio is going, the direction. And this would be more common, how should I say this? There can be composers still. It's just that usually you need a audio director just because there's so much work to do that you have a team, and you need a team of sound designers, musicians, composers, or people maybe externally that just need your constant attention to make sure everyone's in line with the tone and direction, essentially. But it's pretty, again, I've highlighted a composer because it really is, most people that want to be composers in game, write music for games, will start and remain as game composers. If you can make it. Core skills, just broken them down into two different branches, creative and technical. So on the creative side, you obviously need to have a music mastery. So you have to understand music and how to use it creatively in your mind before you actually can start and put it down on paper or in digital format. I've also put in as a secondary mastery instrument. If you can play an instrument, that is amazing. You don't need to. I know lots of composers that don't play any instruments or just have limited knowledge of an instrument. The biggest advantage you would get from knowing an instrument is obviously that you can actually perform the music yourself, on top of the fact that you obviously have a deep understanding and knowledge of that particular instrument. But again, not necessary. For music mastery, you've got essentially composition and arrangement. Composition is like your original ideas put onto paper, starting to realize them. An arrangement is maybe taking an existing idea and making it your own somehow. And if you go down from there on a slightly more granular level, you've got the orchestration. Instrumentation is where those ideas get assigned to instruments in an orchestra or to a band, or in electronic music to different synths. Because again, you can give the composition, you can give the same melody and chord progression to 10 different composers, and they'll all come up with something drastically different. Just because it's creatively how you apply everything. I've put in mixing there because I've got an audio engineering background, and I really do believe that mixing is a both technical and very creative aspect. Technical side of things, dual mastery, digital audio workstation, doesn't matter what you work with as long as you know it really well. But it's something that you require. As someone working in music, you don't need to know audio middleware, but it's helpful, it's an advantage, just like the instrument on the creative side. because it will allow you to do something, I guess, a little bit more. And that's more relevant for, I'm going to say, working with individual developers or small developers who maybe don't have the, someone right next to them working on the audio, don't have a sound designer, in-house that will take care of this for them. If you as a composer can say, hey, listen, I can provide you this soundtrack, I could also make a really cool interactive version of it using Fmod. And you can just use that Fmod project, hook it up, and it's all ready to go. That's an advantage. Going back to the DAW mastery, you obviously need to know how to produce the music, like literally using the DSP, the effects, the manipulating, each channel to actually make the sound good, reflecting the orchestration, and music editing. I mean, it's obvious, but you need to be able to chop it up and maybe put it into the audio middleware if that's what you're using. Otherwise, you're sending it straight to the dev team. And with the music production, obviously, mixing. I'm going to emphasize this mixing down which again just means getting the levels right on every single instrument, on every single aspect of, whether it's brass, when do the strings come in, and do they, should they be louder or lower? What needs reverb? What needs to be sounds like it's more distant? The panning, everything, mixing. And just very quickly, the cool thing about audio middleware, more for sound designers, but you do get to create cool music systems, essentially, adaptive, because video games are interactive. So if you find a way to make something really unique and cool, that's great. And in that case, you're basically implementing and borderlining music programming, which is really cool. Music frequently asked questions. So how do I get a job as a game composer? You don't. Like I said, while there are in-house positions for composers, generally speaking, these will be freelance jobs. So you need to be running a business. And that's something a lot of people don't understand when they first look at games, look at writing music for games, and maybe don't consider, but it's a very strong point. You basically have to start your own business and start finding clients, not just get a job, because it's very unlikely you'll get a salaried composer job in this industry. So how do we find clients? That's a great question. The biggest one is network. Just being here, speaking with people. Sorry, I'm struggling with my voice a little bit because I just did a speed networking event about an hour ago, and it's a great way to meet people, because people is how you're going to expand and secure jobs. It's just word of mouth. It's a bit cliche, but it really is. It's who you know. Most of my jobs even have been, apart from the first one, sorry, it's who you know. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Showcase reels. It's good to tell everyone you're a composer and you love working for games, but at least show us something, and be concise, like make it for video games if you can. Even if you have 0 video game titles under your belt, it does not matter. There is so much video game footage out there, you don't even need footage. Just, express your idea. If you understand, music in video games, what does a combat track sound like in a jungle in this setting? What does how should a racing car game action track sound like? What should a victorious fanfare sound like in a sci-fi setting? All these kind of things. Just show what you can do, because that's gonna. Because after the networking, if you do get to talk to someone that potentially take you on as a client, you've got to show them what you can do. Another big one is participating in game jams. I mean, again, not only networking, but more to the point, actually collaborating, which is probably the first time you're doing things which you can't do in a reel. So participating in game jams, you will definitely learn a lot of skills, including people skills, which is also important. Do I need to learn Fmod, Wise, Unity, Unreal Engine? Need to? No. But obviously, as I mentioned before, especially the audio middleware, Fmod and Wise, if you do know these engines, it's an advantage. which you might be able to use in acquiring clients. Cool. So voice. Are there any voice actors here? No. Okay. Interesting. I feel voice is basically the ultimate support class. They have a way of literally bringing characters to life in video games. In fact, it is the only pure human element in video games that is like, I don't know how to say it, pure. There's no other, and I think this will remain for eternity. I don't think we'll ever get anything else, no other part of audio and no other discipline, visually or otherwise, will get that pure human touch that voice gives. And I'm talking about human voice, I'm not talking about AI. You can argue that if you like, but again, AI will never get to the level that I believe, not in this century anyway, that's required to take over the pure human actual voice. So again, your primary role in voice will be a voice actor. Just like composer, it's the voice dialogue, just to find asset deliveries. And it is outsourced. And unlike composers, this is like almost purely outsourced. There's no in-house voice acting positions. And similar to the composer, essentially you start as a voice actor because you want to be one, and you end up as a voice actor as you want to be one. But because there's not too many people that are voice actors here, just quickly go through. Voice actors can offer casting and directing services. Like if you're voicing a character for a small indie developer and say, hey, listen, not only can I voice it, but I can help you find the cast for the rest of the characters. And not only that, but I can direct them to get, to take care of that for you. That's really good problem solving. And, you can charge a fee for that, obviously. And in bigger companies, these roles actually exist as individual people. But they like very rare, but obviously the bigger companies. And more to the sound design side of things, I guess with dialogue designers, if you're maybe not a voice actor yourself, but you enjoy, working with voice, how does a dragon sound? How does a demon sound? How does a talking flower sound? You can there are designers out there audio designers that will actually make these work. Create a kind of a template or a chain of DSP plugins that you can feed the voice actors' original lines through. Running out of time, so yeah, creative voice mastery. You obviously need to be a master of your voice, and the two things I usually look for in looking for voice is the character. Like, can you get into character? Does it feel like represents the image we've got in game of the character, and a performance? So you can get into character, that's great, but can you actually deliver believable emotional lines? Technical side of things, recording mastery, and less important, DAW mastery. So you need to know the recording elements. You need to know how to use a microphone, which microphone to use, which one's the best ones to get for voice, and why you need a silent place, why you need acoustics are important. And obviously edit them down and give them to the dev team. How do you get a job as a voice actor? You probably know the answer to this one. You don't. Voice actors, even more so, company or freelancers running a company. So same idea. How do you find clients? It is a good question. Same as a composer. Basically networking, showing what you can do. I got rid of participating in game jams. You can, and if you find some voice actors, you can ask for their experience. But I would consider joining talent agencies or via marketplace online, which we use. Do I need to? No. Unless you take the path of the dialogue designer editor. But these tools generally aren't important for you. And the very last one is sound. That's where I come from. This is probably the most complex class, I would say. So you need to love spreadsheets and number crunching. You're working with numbers constantly, how many assets you're getting into the project, how many assets you need, what are the quality of the sound files, what are we compressing down to, what are we putting all the different sounds in different banks. It's quite varied and complex because It's an interactive medium. So unlike movies where it's all, again, everything's mixed down the same way and you hear it the same every time, adaptive, interactive sound, the sound designer will actually take care of all of that. They'll have to make decisions and design decisions as to what gets brought up in a mix, what gets put down in a mix, and but understanding all the game mechanics, which something composer and voice actor does not need to know. Again, sound design, sound effect asset creation, audio implementation is the expectation. These are generally in-house. And I think I've got about 5 minutes left. Sound designer, there's usually teams of sound designers on medium to large-scale companies. That's why you would have some juniors, mid, and senior. You could go out to Foley artists who help capture real-life sounds and feed them into the sound designer. You could be a technical sound designer who's come in between programmer and sound designer, make sure the tools are ready for the sound designers to use to implement it into the game. Or you could be an audio programmer. The management side of things, you could become an audio lead who kind of leads the sound designers if you've got a decent-sized team. And obviously, kind of like the composer, art direction is one viable path. And there's some extra ones. Core skills, creative sound design. You need to know how to layer different sounds and use effects and DSP to get a cool sound out of it, asset creation. And technically, you have to be a master at digital audio workstations and audio middleware, I believe, for sound editing, for designing the systems that go in, and for the implementation. And that little middle bit is blank because from an audio engineering background, I feel this is probably something that is super important in sound design specifically. Maybe not so for the recording mastery. It's good to have some basic idea of recording mastery, but mixing is the biggest thing. Like I said before, in composition, mixing is, especially the final mix, it's all about the mix. It's both technical and creative. And how do I get a job as a sound designer? Great question. Network, same idea, especially sorting out, because any follow-up jobs you have after your first will generally come through the people you know, the people you've worked with before, the people you've met elsewhere at conferences. Participating in game jams is a good idea. Showcasing what you can do is always good. LinkedIn is always good, just to write down all the credits you have. There are actually sound design listings. Voice acting and composing, not so much. Sound design listings are definitely out there, so keep an eye on them. And consider QA roles. Again, because sound design relies on you fully understanding the game mechanics of a game. I've seen more than a few QA roles turn into sound designers just because they had such a strong knowledge of what happens in a game. And they thought, they kept submitting bugs saying, the sound should do this, the sound should do that. I thought, can I do the sound? And they can, and they could, and they did. Do I need to learn all these? Yes, please do. It's going to make you a stronger sound designer. So, I mean, again, the idea of this trio is, like a holy trinity of RPGs is working together to kind of achieve a goal. And I think we have that in game audio. So, yeah, depending on where you want to go, good luck. Have fun. Questions? I think we've got like a couple minutes for questions. Yes?
Do you find that music and sound design often in smaller studios, like that's kind of what you have to do it all sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. If it's a small studio and you have an in-house sound designer, it's likely they'll take care of the music as well. It might mean that, hey, listen, this project is actually bigger than we thought. Can we contract out I'll find a composer. I know someone. And that's when, through networking, it's like, oh, I met someone at NZGDC. They had a pretty good reel. Maybe they can do the music for this game, or they can help me out with the soundtrack because I'm running out of time. But yes, they'll ideally be, in many cases, the one in the same. One of the last project, Grimguard Tactics, which is coming out next week for our company, I was the sole composer on that. But I wasn't on a previous title just because you already had cool composers from overseas doing it. So yeah, but yes, it happens. It's common. Anyone else?
Is it better to be a contractor or is it better to be employed, do you think?
Well, that's a personal choice. It really depends on your situation, where you are in life. I think ultimately, from a entrepreneurial perspective, starting your own company and having that a success is always a big thing. But what I find personally is I enjoy the interaction, being inside the studio with all the artists, with all the programmers. Something I didn't mention is, as a sound designer, you are like a diplomat. You have to talk to art, you have to talk to programming, you have to talk to everyone and find out what's going on, tell them what you want. You know, it's an interaction that, you know, I mean, it's good. I'm quite introverted, but even I enjoy, you know, speaking with my team and seeing what they're doing. You know, getting excited first time I see something they've done and going, oh, I'm going to work on that in 2 weeks because I'm busy until then. So, yeah. Cool. If there's nothing else, we'll wrap up. Cool. Thank you.